Thoth was, when Thoth first came to me, he first appeared to me, I believe it was in 1972. And the angels had come to me and they had given me his, well, they didn't give me his name. They gave me the name of this guy named Wilt Chipman, who was a Canadian in British Columbia, and told me I was to go there. And I studied alchemy with him for 2 years. And he was really doing it. Though he wasn't sure himself that he was really doing it. He really was. He figured out how to turn mercury into gold, which is just, the process itself is not as important as the understanding of how it does that. So you can apply it from this level. It's really the process of how this level of consciousness goes into Christ consciousness. And by understanding how mercury goes into gold or lead into gold, you can understand how that takes place on a human level. The truth is that alchemy is not just that, though it's been centered on that. All chemical levels whatsoever, and all chemical reactions have their counterparts in human experience. Though alchemy is pretty much focused on this one step because it's the most important one for us at this time. I studied this with him for 2 years. He had a little house like a little ordinary house in Burnaby, Canada. And I don't know if I've ever said this before, but I'll say it. And up in this room, he had this bubble machine, this machine filled with this liquid, and mercury would rise in there, and as it would change different colors. And when it got to the top, it would turn to solid gold and sink back down. So you had these little bubbles coming up and turning into gold, and they'd collect a whole bunch of gold out there. And every day he'd collect these things up. And he built this chemistry lab downstairs. So you would go into this house, like an ordinary house, and you go into this closet, and you go down this elevator into this incredible space angel downstairs. But he'd spent millions of dollars on building this place hidden to the rest of the world. And it was huge. It was about the size of this whole room in here, filled with everything you can think of, electron balances to everything that you ever need or want. And anyway, I was studying alchemy with him, and about 2 years down the line one day, pretty far down the line, we were in Nelson, British Columbia, and he wanted to teach me a particular meditation, and so I sat down and learned this meditation. It was an open-eyed meditation where we were looking into each other's eyes. And as I started doing this meditation, we did it for about an hour or two. I don't know how long it was in time, but it was a long time. We're staring, and the room had gone away and everything. All there was just sort of his eyes I was looking at. When suddenly something happened that never happened before, and he just disappeared. And at first I thought it was just a phenomenal effect of my eyes, watching this guy's eyes for so long. And he was gone for a long time, and finally I reached over and I kind of went like this, you know? And there was nobody there, you know, he was just gone. And it was like, wow. And, you know, but this time my concentration was back in the room. I was really looking on the spot, and there was nobody there. And after a few minutes, this person reappeared there, just appeared. And only it wasn't him, it was somebody else. Totally different, it wasn't even close. And he was about 35 years old. This guy was maybe 65 or 70 years old. And he wasn't Anglo-white type. He was dark-skinned. And he looked very Egyptian. And he was not very tall, maybe 5'3" or 4. And he was clean-shaven, but with a long beard that was tied in 5 places and down off his chin. Real thick, tied down. And he wore very simple tan, long-sleeve pants and shirts, but they looked like they were made out of cotton. Real simple clothing. And the thing that got me about this person that just grasped my heart was his eyes. He didn't have anything going on. Everybody's got stuff going on, you know, so it's kind of hard to look at some people's eyes because there's more stuff going on than other people. You know, if you look into their aura, you see more and more stuff. But when he didn't have anything. It was like looking in. It was just like looking into the eyes of a baby. You know, have you ever looked in babies' eyes? Like, you can look in there. You know, it's okay to look down in there. It's really okay. And that's just how he was. And I never ever met an adult like that before. Not even any of my teachers. Nobody. I'd never seen that before. And I was really impressed with that. And he told me that there were 3 atoms missing in the universe, and wanted to know if I knew where they were. I don't really know. And so he gave me a very interesting experience, which I'm not going to talk about here, but when I got back from that experience, I understood what he meant. And I said, okay, I understand. I told him what I learned, and he just smiled and bowed at me and disappeared again, and a few minutes later, Alpha's teacher came back. And I never knew who that guy was. I was studying with 5 different teachers at that time, and besides 4 other ones besides Wilf. And so when the angels who were coming in 2 and 3 times a day at that point, I never asked them who he was, and time went by, and I didn't do it initially, and so as time went by, I just kind of let it go, and he never came up again, and months went by, and then years went by, until finally it was 12 years went by, and one day, 12 years later, he reappeared, and my life changed dramatically. That was on November 1st of 1984, and which I will tell the story at the right time about what happened when we came back in. Okay, Thoth came in, and back in, again, he was gone for 12 years. He came back in 1984, in November 1st. And over a period of several months, he began to teach me or instruct me in sacred geometry. I had been instructed from the angels from the very, very first. It was the angels who actually gave me the breathing that we're teaching here. And they taught me a great deal of the sacred geometry. But when he came in, he says, okay, I want to see what you got. And I just gave it to him in this like little ball of white. And he looked at the whole thing and told me that I was missing a whole lot. And so he sat me down every day for several months. He would come into the room, sit down with me on a pillow, and have me make drawings. And I did this for day after day after day after day after day. And after a long period of time, I came up with this drawing here, which was the end result of maybe 3 months of work or something. Of course, this is after I was in I'd already been working for 12 years, and then I came up with this one. And when he got done, he said this was a very special sacred geometry drawing. It was one of the most important ones. It was the first chromosome in the human body. Each of your chromosomes are actually geometrical patterns. And in the geometry of the patterns, which you'll understand this when you get done here, in the very geometry of the chromosome is contained the instructions on how not to just make the human body, but the entire reality. Everything, including the quasars and the planets and galaxies and everything. And the plants, all the other life forms, not just human, everything's all in there. Only there are certain levels that are missing. There are certain aspects that are missing. The first time that consciousness is self-aware, which we talked about as the Australians, they have 42 plus 2 chromosomes. When it jumps up one more, we gain 2 chromosomes, and we go to 44 plus 2 is what we have. When we go to Christ consciousness, we'll gain 2 more chromosomes and go to 46 plus 2. And then there will be this state further down the line where we will go to 48 plus 2, and then finally the 5th state that we pass through these 5 states, will come to 50 plus 2, 52. And by the way, when I first put this out, which was over 7.5 years ago, there was no scientific proof whatsoever that what I was saying had any basis in biology at all, until in the last couple of years, someone tested the Aboriginals in Australia. Nobody's ever done it, I guess. Nobody ever figured out and found out that they all have 42 plus 2 chromosomes. They don't have 44 plus 2 like us. And since then, they found a couple tribes in Africa, I understand, that also have the 44 plus 2. Got many different names all around the world and in various places of the universe, but the one that he called it was the flower of life. Though it's also been called the language of silence and the language of light. Because it is a language, as you're about to see, and it's a language that's hidden underneath, like the words that I'm saying right here. A statement that was pretty outrageous from normal ways of thinking. He says, everything is in here. All the laws of physics, all structure, all crystal structure, all biological life forms in the very shape of every little detail in their bodies, all the planetary bodies, all atomic structure, everything, the entire reality, everything that created it was in this one single image. And that sounds like a pretty powerful statement until you really begin to see how this works. When he got done teaching all this, he then told me that I would find this image in Egypt. And there was 2 times when I doubted him. And I doubted him on that one because I thought I had read just about everything there was in Egypt, and that did not look like an Egyptian symbol to me. It looked more Christian or something, but it did not look Egyptian. And he just said, you'll find it in Egypt, and left. And since then, by the way, we found it all over the world, just about everywhere. You'll see at the very end of this, you'll see some of the places that we found it in, but almost everywhere. And well, 2 weeks later, I'm sitting in Taos, New Mexico, in Smith's food store, buying some groceries, and Katrina Raphael, this friend of mine who writes books on crystals, was in there. And I had taken her to Egypt the first time she went, and she had just come back from Egypt the second time. And she's a woman who takes a camera and just starts, loading it up, and she takes pictures. And she was sitting there at the counter, taking 36 out at a time and putting them on a stack, and she had a stack of pictures a good 12 inches high or so. She was still stacking them up when I came up to her. And we started talking, saying hello, how you doing, and that kind of stuff. And she said she just got back from Egypt. And then she says, oh, by the way, she says, she has an angel that has guided her into writing the books that she wrote and gave her the information that she wrote and told her how to get the information through the crystals that she wrote. And I believe that angel's name is Sorel, I think. But anyway, she said that Sorel told her when she was in Egypt that she was to give me a photograph as soon as she saw me. And I said, oh, okay, give me the photograph. And she goes, well, I don't know which one it is. So she turns around away from the things, goes through and pulls one out at random and hands it to me. And when she did, she handed me this photograph, which was the flower of life on one of the oldest walls in Egypt. That wall's about 6,000 years old. And she didn't know, at that time, she didn't know what I was doing. She had no idea. That thing didn't mean a thing to her at all. But to me, it was like wow. If you could pick one photograph in the world, that one, you got me pretty good on that one. Later, I went to that place. I went back again. I had to go there once I found out it was there. I had to go find out what was there. And I went back again, and where that was located, this is in Abydos here. And this is from the Dog Star here. Which is serious. And behind, this is Seti the First Temple in Abydos, and behind that, there's actually 3 temples. There's a Seti the First Temple goes like this. There's 3 temples. This is where we're looking right at, like this right now. And there's a real ancient, one of the oldest temples in all of Egypt sits back here. It's called the Osiris. It's where Osiris supposedly was put back together. If you know that story where he was cut into 14 pieces. And this was like a really holy place to the ancient Egyptians. It was so holy that many of the kings in the olden days didn't have them, like Zoser, for example, who was Menes, same person, that he didn't bury himself in Saqqara, which is, he had himself buried here. And a lot of the old kings did that. Even though they built these huge things that would look like us where they would do it, they had themselves buried here or around here. Well, so Seti I was building this because of this, and as he was building back in here, there was a little hill here, and as he was building into here, he discovered an even more ancient temple that they didn't know about here. And so he turned his temple and made an L-shaped temple, which is the only L-shaped temple in all of Egypt, which is part of the proof that he didn't build this. Some people think that he faked this, but there's controversy over whether he did this or not. But this is, to me, is proof that he did not do it. Nowhere else has anyone ever made this L. He did the L so he wouldn't have to go in here and mess up that other one. And there's one thing I want to say before I go into those temples in the back. This is the inside of the Seti I temple. What they have discovered in Egypt in the last few years, there's writing that goes to within maybe, I don't know, from your knees all the way up to the top of this 35-foot ceiling or whatever that is up there, and even up on the pillars way at the very top. And when you go to, who's been to Egypt here? Okay, there's quite a few, about 10, 12 people. You notice that you go into these temples, and many of the figures that are on the wall, that are in either relief or whatever, however they're on there, have been chipped away or destroyed. And for a long time, they may have told you, I don't know, that it was because of the Romans and other people who had come in here had destroyed these things. They now know that's not true. They know it's not true beyond any doubt whatsoever, though they didn't know for a long time, because they've discovered in recent times that the language on the walls was placed there in such a way that there was a time frame. The language that is from about, roughly about this high down, was speaking of the past. And from about this high up to maybe 9 or 10 feet, or maybe even 12 feet up the walls, was the present at the time the temple was built. And the stuff that is up further is future, what they think is going to happen in the future. And they now know that who did it, because there's only one person who could have known who did it, or one group of people, and that was the priests themselves that created the temples or took care of the temples. They were the ones that went around and destroyed the writing on the walls, because only the writing that was of the present time of the temples was touched. The past and the future was not touched. And somebody just going in there, like the Romans, just to go in there and cause hell, would not have known that, or could not have picked that out so carefully to just touch the present. Now to them, what they put on those walls was, when they wrote what was going to happen in the future, that was just it. That's what was going to happen. And if you don't believe that they can't see what was going to happen in the future, you're going to see a slide at the very, very end of this. I don't know how it came up on the, for those of you who saw the videos, you probably couldn't see it very clearly or not, but you'll see this one very clearly. There's going to be a slide at the very, very end of here. I'm going to wait till the end. I've got to make it dramatic. It's more fun that way. And that slide's going to be way up high up off of one of these pillars way up there at the very, very top. And it'll be proof that they could clearly see into the future, no doubt. But you have to wait till we get there. This is the Siren Temple, which is this one back here. And it's very, very old. You're not supposed to go down in there, but I couldn't stand it. So I dropped off this thing and ran inside and took a whole bunch of pictures before they dragged me out of there. And I just had to see in there. The writing is so simple. It's so beautiful. It's just straightforward and clear. There's no junk in the middle. The writing in Egypt and in Samaria, when it came out, was in its absolute, most sophisticated, perfect form, and then degenerated after that. Got worse. Came out in its absolute clearest form with also with no evolutionary pattern before. It just came out in one day. Just one day, suddenly, it's perfect writing on the walls, with nothing leading up to it. No evolution, absolutely zero, both in Samaria and in Egypt. And then got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse, and they never could understand that. You'll understand it in just a little bit. Anyway, they got me out of there, and when they did, I went over to here. And this is the one, that's the back of the site of the first temple, and I'm standing right now here, taking a picture toward here. And this temple was also called the Osirian Temple, and it was dedicated to resurrection, according to the hieroglyphics that are found in here. And there's this ramp right here, and it was over here where that flower of life pattern was found. Now, this is the building when they first excavated it, and it was dry in there now. The Nile has changed its level and it's filling up with water. And they talk about these three steps, where these steps came up this way, a thing in the middle, and the steps go back down again. These three different levels, which are associated with the three levels of consciousness, the 42, the 44, and the 46, that we're going through, which are all associated with resurrection. And this temple, this was done by Lucy de Lubitz, which was Swallow de Lubitz's daughter. She reconstructed the temple from a blueprint plan, and then discovered that it was based upon the sacred geometry of two back-to-back pentagons. She wasn't exactly sure why, all she knew that it was. But in today, when we start talking about the grids, you'll discover that the grids I'm talking about, actual electromagnetic fields of energy that exist around the Earth. Primarily, these grids exist from about an average of about 60 feet in the Earth, average, to about 60 miles above the Earth. Every life form on the planet, even if there's only 2 bugs, has a grid stretching around the whole Earth. And these grids are all superimposed, stretching up for these 60 miles up, which causes like this light blue glow around the Earth. And the highest ones are the whales. And then the dolphins come after that, and then the humans. And there's 3 primary human ones. And the newest one, which was just finished in 1989, after 13,000 years of work of constructing it, is based on a stellated dodecahedron. And a stellated, though we haven't talked about these kind of things yet, this is a dodecahedron. It's 12 pentagons. And this is an icosahedron, and if you notice in here, there's another pentagon, and with five triangles in it. You can see the similarity between these two shapes. If you were to take this out of there, this is called an icosahedral cap in sacred geometry. And when you open up a icosahedral cap, it's these 2 back-to-back pentagons like this. And the icosahedral cap is the key to the Christ consciousness grid. Because if you take a dodecahedron and put one of these in each one of these things here, that's what the primary shape of the Christ consciousness grid is. And so it was very clever of them, from my way of thinking, to base the geometries of this on something that would eventually, that they clearly understood even back then, and were in the process even back then of building, and knowing that someday would be completed. this is the place where it was found, which was right here. And I had a little better camera than Katrina had. And you can see that there's actually two of these side by side here. And I took a shot right next to it over here. And though I know you can't see this real well, this one here is called the Seed of Life, which we're going to look at in just a little bit here. And there's all kinds of patterns all around here, which are all based on this geometry. I put my camera around the side like this over here. I couldn't get around here because there was water and everything in there. Just to see what was over there. And again, this is the back side. You can see this. I know you can't see these real well, probably from where you are, but these are all symbols that you'll find all over the world and in churches and everywhere. And they're all understandings or what stuff that you're going to learn about in this workshop right here was on this wall. It was almost like this was a school, that they were teaching this kind of stuff. After you go to one of these workshops and you go back there and you stand at the Silent Temple and you see all the symbols, you get this weird feeling because it's so familiar. I mean, it's just like, holy cow. I mean, it's just like, you know what's on the walls. You know what they're talking about. And it's just, and they're talking about everything. Way over there, and this is with an 80mm lens, way over here, there's this image which you can barely see. That's a long ways away, actually. And that image looks like this. This is what was drawn carefully, though, over on there. And that symbol is the symbol of the first Christians in the world before Christ was ever even born, which are the Coptics, which are also Egyptian. 500 years before Christ was born, they were talking about him coming. And this was the symbol that they used for him. And here it is, etched in one of the Egyptian walls. That was another symbol for him, which was the triangle with the cross in the middle. Over here. And another symbol for him that the Coptics gave. Oh, wait a minute. This is another one that they etched in one of the Egyptian walls. And notice here is not only that symbol, but at the top, the 6 petals of the flower of life, which is the central core. You'll see both these 6 petals and sometimes the 6 petals with these 6 outer ones around it. And many times you'll see them side by side. You can go into St. Mary's. Once I climbed Mount Sinai, where Moses saw the burning bush, and the bottom of there is, I think it's St. Catherine's. That's what it is. St. Catherine's is a monastery. It's a Coptic monastery. They won't let you take any photographs. But when you go in there, you'll see the 6-petaled pattern on the wall, along right next to it with the 6-petal pattern with the 6 around it, showing that they had the understanding of the flower of life in there. And this was the, here's another one. They sometimes would do it like this, where they would take 4 intersecting circles surrounded by a circle. Another symbol for Christ. And this was another symbol for Christ. A fish that breathes air. It just happens to have 13 scales on it. And you can check this one out as an interesting bit of information. Even today, Christ is, you'll see this symbol for Christ. You all are familiar with this one. You know, of the fish. And 200 years after Christ died, the Greek Orthodox Church took over the power of the Catholic Roman Church. And at that time, there were many, many changes that were made. And one of them was, prior to those 200 years, in the first 200 years before then, Christ was not known just as the fish. Specifically, he was known as the dolphin. Exactly what that connection is, I don't know. But that's for sure. And then later, it became known. But there was this fish connection. It could very well be that it was because of the timing of Pisces. Before, when Christ came in, he came in right at the beginning of Pisces. And before that time was Taurus. And they worshipped the bull. And the golden bull and all the stuff that was done on there, which was that time. And when Jesus came and became the fish in the Pisces, the bull was thrown down and was no longer the symbol that was being worshipped. So, again, I mean, this first whole day really is just, we're going to be going about all kinds of different subjects, and we're just trying to get a background of basic information so we can all communicate on. This is Flower of Life again, and I want to show you a relationship in the Flower of Life. The flower, it was called the Flower of Life because, or one of the reasons why, is, well, if you take the image of a tree, specifically a fruit tree comes up, it grows up, and it gets little flowers on it. And then the flowers become a fruit. They change from a flower into a fruit. And then inside of the fruit is the seed that contains the image of the whole tree. And so there is this cycle pattern from a tree to a flower to a fruit to a seed to a tree again that goes around, this particular kind of pattern. And they felt that sacred geometry had that same kind of nature to it. And to show that, this was the flower here. It's 19 circles in here surrounded by 2. And if you were to take out the center circle here and the 6 around the center, does everybody understand that? This one, and then there's a center of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, those 6 circles around there. If you take that out like this, does everybody get that? Okay. This is called the seed of life. They felt that it was the seed. Now that was another one that was, I told you, it was on that wall right next to the other one, right next to the flower. And there's another image here that some of you are familiar with probably, which is called the tree of life. And there are 10 spheres connected by these lines. Now originally there were 12 spheres. No doubt about that, because the oldest known tree of life is not Hebrew, but is Egyptian. And they're on 3 pillars at Luxor and 3 pillars at Karnak, Egypt, with the tree of life etched right on there, only with 1 sphere above and 1 sphere below. 1 up there and 1 below, up here. And but the Jews and the Egyptians had a lot in common. They lived together for a long time. So I'm sure they were interconnected on this belief. And the Kabbalah, by the way, which is the main form that you will find this through today, which we tend to believe is Hebrew, has only been out, as my understanding, at least in present-day time, for 1,700 years. These pillars go way back thousands of years, at least almost 2,000 years before that. And now here's the thing. If you were to take the seed of life, if this is truly the seed, and this image that I was just referring to, how a tree goes to a flower, to a fruit, to a seed, and back to a tree, if that image is that kind of metaphor is contained in the geometry, then the tree would have to be contained in the seed. Do you understand? In there would have to be, in the seed, would have to be the tree. That would have to be the source of the tree of the Kabbalah, the tree of life. And so if it's true, then those two should superimpose geometrically. This should fit right over the top. And when you do it, you'll see that it fits just like a key, perfectly. Absolutely nothing left over. There's one point there, 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 here, 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 there, and the 10th one is down here, exactly on the two rims. If you fit 12, the 12 one that we found on the other one, the 12 one will fit right on the flower. Where exactly where the 11th and the 12th one will fit precisely above and below, delineating where the flower is. So you get a feel. This is just a real gentle feel of what sacred geometry is about. It's going to get a lot more hardcore, logical preciseness is going to about to enter into all of this in a little bit. These are wheels that are found on the ceilings in Egypt in tombs, in the really oldest of all the tombs. Nobody knows, no Egyptian archaeologist on the planet that I know what they are. And I've talked to many of the world-famous Egyptian archaeologists, and they don't know. They don't know what they are, or why they are, or what they mean. But to me, I know where they came from. Thoth showed me how they were extracted and what they are. And slowly over time I'll show you, but they're proof that the Egyptians just didn't know about the pattern of the flower of life and didn't know about all this knowledge that we're about to tell you. They're proof because in order to get to those wheels, you've got to go deep, 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 deep into the sacred geometry until you get way down in there, and then you'll find these wheels that will come out, and they're these guys. And they're the key to the harmonics of music, but they're also the key to the harmonics of the dimensional levels. And what you see here, these are always on the ceiling, up in the sky. They're surrounded by the stars. And here, though you can't see this, is a procession of people with animal heads walking in a straight line. If this was a floor, it'd be about like that. And they have these red-orange ovals over their heads, which are, according to Thoth, used to be called the egg of metamorphosis. And you'll understand why metamorphosis is involved in this at one point. And they're walking along here, and then suddenly there's a 90-degree turn, 90 degrees, and they're now walking this way, into the stars, and he's putting a sphere through the bull, which shows you how old this is, going back into the time of Taurus. And I'm going to have to leave these for a while to explain what they are, because we have a lot to lay down before this will all make sense. But these wheels they're maps. They're telling you exactly where they went, precisely where in the dimensional levels and what they were doing and where they were going. This is Leonardo's drawing. Again, this is all introduction still. It's Leonardo's drawing with a little bit of me on there. I drew this person sitting down here and some of this other stuff around there. This is going to be a very important drawing in what we're doing. Though sacred geometry, as you will see, can discuss any subject whatsoever, there is no limit on what subject it cannot discuss and describe in detail. I'm going to have blinders on as I discuss sacred geometry. I'm only interested in one thing here. The purpose of this workshop is ascension, which is consciously moving from one world to another, bringing your body with you, which is a little different than resurrection, which is dying, and then afterwards, while you pass through the bardo, to consciously pass through the great void, and then reconstruct your body in that way, which is another possibility. It's just as noble as this one, but there's just another possibility is all. And so in this one here, we are going to be concerned with ascension in the vehicle of ascension called the Merkaba. And the understanding of the Merkaba comes from the remembering of the crystalline energy field that's around the body. This field, and we've had instruments that can detect this field very carefully, will average about 55 feet in diameter, or about 27.5 feet radius around the average person. It'll be bigger if you were taller, and it'll be slightly smaller if you were less. But I'd say they would average somewhere between 50 and 60 feet total. And this is the innermost field. The innermost field, which happens to be right out here at your fingertips, is a star tetrahedral field. It looks like this. And this is going to be the key. This is going to be the doorway. There are other doorways. There are other electromagnetic fields around the body that could be utilized to create different types of Merkabas. I'm not going to say this is the only way, but we're only going to give the instructions on one. This is the easiest, most simplest one of them all, and it's the closest one in. There is another little tiny one at the base of the spine. Little tiny, 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 itty bitty, 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 tiny one, which is the original 8 cells, which are in the form of a star tetrahedron, which our electron microscopes can see that they are, and which happens to be in the center of that field. We grew geometrically radially out. We did not grow lengthwise. We grew out in shells that go out. Out at 55 feet, you will find that there's a big round sphere. Just in from the side of that, you're going to find that there's a dodecahedron around that. And then and if you connect the centers of the dodecahedron together, it forms an icosahedron. And there's a nesting pattern that comes in from there all the way down to the central place at the base of your spine. There is a tube that runs from the top, which is directly over the top of your head, 1 hand length above your head, to 1 hand length below your feet down here. And there's a tube that runs through there. That tube the size will vary with each person, but if you take your thumb and your longest finger, your middle finger, and put them together, that's how big around your tube is in diameter. And it comes up into a little crystalline pattern, fits up into the apex, and it's just like a fluorescent tube running through and connects down at this point down here. It connects into other types of fields. There's also an octahedral field that's around here, and it also connects into other fields. There's what is called a cube equilibrium or a cube octahedron that is also connected through this one. But again, we're only going to be interested in this one field, these 2 interlocked tetrahedrons. And so it is this field that as I keep speaking, I'm going to keep aiming for this and aiming for this to reach the understanding of what this is really all about. And the breathing that we're going to do, instead of taking prana in or breath in through our mouth, we're going to stop breathing through our mouth like we do now and start breathing through the top of our head and begin to breathe up through the perineum from underneath. And just to clarify this a little bit more, for some of you who don't know what prana is, there are, in this invisible space right here, we know that there is air, and it's oxygen, nitrogen, etc., the various molecules of there. But also in that space, even if there was no air there, is another substance, if you want to call it a substance, an energy, which is called prana. And prana is everywhere. There is nowhere where it is not. If you had a big chunk of solid steel here, a block as big as this, it would be in the center of it. If you were in deep space and with absolute voidness, there's prana there. It makes no difference where you are, there's always prana, and it's all you need. It's your new science of tachyon energy, which is, and the Yin machine and a lot of the over-unity generators that are now being created are simply connecting into fourth dimensional prana fields, which is everywhere. It's unlimited. There's no end to the amount of energy, unless we live in a limited world like we do, where we don't know about it. we're using oil and stuff like that. Energy is not a problem for most life forms. That's the least of their problems. And so this is where we're going to be heading. We're going to learn to take the prana down this tube and the prana coming up this tube, and it's going to meet. The male and female prana is going to meet. Where it meets, you can control with your mind. And where it meets, which chakra it meets in, which energy center in the body it meets in, is an ancient science, which we're just going to start just lightly touch upon here in this class. Though you guys know it. I mean, you know it all, man. You've used your Merkaba millions and millions of times. This is nothing new, though for some of you, you may not quite remember. You've got a pretty good idea that it's there, but you can't quite remember. But once you connect into it, the memories are going to come back very rapidly because you're professionals. You'll know what it is. All right. We're going to come back to this many, many times again over here in time. But this is where we're heading. Leonardo understood this very